Hi y'all. I wanted to jump on here to give my honest reaction to Brendon urie's first performance and also his recent interview with Sirius XM. Y'all, I am blown away with just how awesome he seems to be doing. There is a thoughtfulness about his approach to music this time as he's described it that I think is so beautiful. So I'm gonna start with an overview of what I heard from this interview with Sirius XM, and I'm gonna reference my notes just a little bit. So first thing that I kind of noticed is that he mentioned experiencing loss and how it kind of helped him gain some perspective on, you know, how precious life is. So he experienced some loss during the pandemic, early in the pandemic, I think. He said two family members, not sure who they are exactly. My dogs are going nuts. Okay. And then the other thing he talked about was really reinventing his approach to writing music and performing, like in general. And then the last thing that I kind of took away from this interview in particular was that he's really trying to keep his music honest and joyful, which is, as a professional musician, this can sometimes be the hardest thing to do consistently. So I wanted to just start off by saying those are the things that I'm going to talk about. Once again, this is kind of reviewing his first performance on the Today Show, which he mentioned in this interview with Sirius XM, and the interview on Sirius XM. I'm gonna link this Today Show performance in the description box and also the interview link too. So let's get into it. So, as most of us probably can relate to, Brendon talked a lot about how he just struggled with depression during particularly the beginning, I guess, of the pandemic. And he mentioned he didn't leave the house for 8 months. Now, that may not seem like a weird thing when we were all kind of sent home-ish and our lives changed. But to a performer, I think that not leaving the house can have a lot of different implications. And one of the things that he said was that when he got home, right before the pandemic started, was that he had just finished tour, the Pray for the Wicked tour, and it was the first time he'd kind of been home. And so that was normal for him to like take a load off, but then the world shut down because COVID. And I remember him saying in the interview that he just kind of was like, oh, we're doing this now? Okay, I was planning to take time off, but how much is too much time? And do we get back to normal? And he said at some point he started streaming on Twitch a lot, and some of y'all probably saw this. He was streaming on Twitch a lot, and he mentioned about 3 months into the lockdown, he was on Twitch a lot, connecting with the bros, having a good time with fans. But then whenever the number would get to a certain number of fans, like if he got like a lot of people watching, he went into performer mode again, even though he's at home streaming. And so he mentioned that he had to take a break and take a step back from even Twitch streaming because he was kind of unconsciously going into performer mode, even though he's literally at home. So I thought that was an incredible insight into just how much it actually takes to turn off that performer instinct for performers. The next thing I really want to talk about is how he's talked about his creativity during the pandemic and while he was at home. So apparently he didn't do much when he got home, which was technically normal. Chilling out, getting off tour and chilling out was like the thing to do. What else are you gonna do? And it took him about 3 months to kind of unwind and reset his life schedule. He said he spent a lot of time with his wife and just, you know, grew so grateful for that connection. But one of the other things he said was that he kind of stopped playing for about 3 or so months at the beginning of the lockdown. He just did it. He didn't really write. He didn't practice, really. He didn't do anything with music. And one of the first introductions back into music was via a friend who he said bought a property and they were going to turn it into a rehearsal space for them to, like, you know, strum guitars in or whatever and practice. But also they were building a skateboard ramp around it. And so this sort of fun activity of building the skateboard ramp was also tied to a kind of like rehearsal space with no pressure to like be Brendon the performer. So he mentioned that one of the first times he started actually practicing again was that this guy who invited him over, I think it was him or another friend that's part of the producing group for this album and also the background singers. If you notice in the show set, there are 3 guitarists on the upper right side of the stage. If you're looking at the stage, they're back there. And I think the tall guy, I think this is the guy who I'm about to talk about, Mike Viola. Apparently the guy introduced him to Mike Viola. They became friends, and I'm not sure if that's who he was building the skateboard ramp for or with, but regardless, this new friend, Mike Viola, they just connected in the middle of the pandemic, and they just wanted to have fun with music. And this guy gifted him a guitar that he'd been playing every time they kind of played around in the rehearsal space. And he gifted him this guitar, and Brendon said this guitar was the first instrument that he kind of started re-practicing in the pandemic after not really doing music seriously at all. He started practicing, he said he got good. And then this is how he wrote some of the beginning entries of the album. He started writing with the guitar he was practicing on and having a fulfilled kind of creative moment with. He usually wrote for piano, he said, so this was totally new, which is just, it's beautiful to me that it takes a person gifting you an instrument that you're connected to, that reignites that creative spark for you. I think that's just gorgeous. One of the other things that I want to mention about him and Mike Viola, and y'all check me on who Mike Viola is to him and who he is in the musical set with Brendon. One of the things that he said was that he and Mike Viola initially kind of connected on the fact that they loved making music together because they like some of the same chord progressions. The chord progression that he particularly spoke about that they love is a major 1, minor 6, followed by a major 4, and then a minor 4. And he's like, this is the saddest, most badass like chord progression ever. And he's just addicted to him. And he says he uses that a ton in his music. So y'all go play it, go memorize it, expect to hear it at the shows. Another thing that Brendon said happened when he was kind of connecting with Mike Viola and beginning to kind of create again in the pandemic was that he started writing music to feel good. And as a performer myself, I oftentimes undertake performing activities like practice or writing or studying with a very kind of stoic, determined, not so necessarily fun approach. And he mentioned that he just started writing music that made him feel good, that was inspired by nostalgia and the things and the sounds and the musical influences that he grew up on. And I think that's so beautiful because we can lose that as performers. We can lose that spark for sometimes all the right reasons. Sometimes we need to put our heads down and get things done, but you can't always do that. Burnout is more imminent if we're not joyful about what we do. And so he said he started just being inspired by silly, creative oldies. And one of the other things he said was that oldies make him feel young. And some of the bands that he referenced that he grew up on and that influenced this album in particular were The Who, Pinball Wizard, David Bowie, The Beatles, Beach Boys, which I love so much, Queen, of course, Billy Joel, Thin Lizzy. Those are some of the people that he mentioned specifically. And of course, if you've seen my other videos, I was like, oh, this is a Queen tribute album for sure, because it's just, it reeks of that. Reeks is a terrible word. It is just really, it's really rich with that kind of rock opera feel of the Queen style, which Brendon actually mentioned. He said he wanted to write a rock opera when he started getting super serious about music, after he realized that him and Mike Viola weren't just playing around in the studio anymore. They were like, let's do some things. And Brendon's like, let's write a rock opera, you know, inspired by Queen and those type of bands. And he talked about making music in the style of what he grew up listening to. I think that's beautiful that you can do that as a performer. And I think it's beautiful when you come back to the things that inspire you and let that be the jumping off point for how you grow creatively. One thing that I want to mention is that he talked a little bit about Sad Clown. There's a video for Sad Clown. And in addition to him mentioning that he wrote a total of, he recorded a total of, I think, 9 videos in like 6 days. He mentioned the video for Sad Clown, how it has some super, super theatrical visual effects and movement, but also in terms of the music, it's just very operatic. It's very, very theatrical. And one of the things that he mentioned was that this whole Sad Clown song became part of something they actually finished and put on the album, because he had someone in his circle, or he had rented a harpsichord. Now, if y'all don't know what a harpsichord is, it is the OG piano keyboard instrument. The thing goes out of tune easily because the way that it's made, and harpsichords are hard to come by, period, but they're hard to come by. So he rented this thing and he was playing around on the harpsichord. And that turned into the inspiration, the foundation for the Sad Clown theme and kind of classical influence in that video. You'll notice they're wearing wigs, they're kind of painted faces, and it's just really, it's really kind of a classical music parody feeling to it, which I think ties back great with the fact that you're using a period instrument from that era. So actually late Baroque, but still that era. So he mentioned that Sad Clown was influenced by an instrument that he was playing on. Another thing that I think ties into this sort of artist uses instruments that are available or inspirational, and also artists collaborating with things in their immediate space or in their immediate in their history, like musical influences on them personally as an individual. Another thing, like the harpsichord connection to the Sad Clown sort of theme, is that the interviewer asked him in the interview, but the interviewer asked him, is there a through line? Is there a story to this album? And Brendon said what I think is just excellent about being an artist, and it's the truth about it. He said that the characters, the recurring characters that we're seeing like in these videos and things, they were not individually conceived characters. He said that these characters were based on words and names that he liked to sing. He maybe liked the way that a word felt, and so he kept writing it into songs. He talked about the words Gloria and Euphoria in Sad Clown, and he also talked about the names Maggie, Gloria, and Gilly, he said. And what I love about that is that as a music teacher, these are very vowel heavy words, and they're very forward vowel heavy words. And so honestly, forward vowels are great to sing. They're easy, they're bright. You don't need to do much altering to them to make them gorgeous and resonant. And he talked about how we like singing these words, so these became the characters that we're going to use recurringly. It just proves again that he's in search of what feels beautiful and natural and authentic to him versus here's the agenda, let's do everything in honor of the agenda. So I think it's lovely. The other thing that I want to point out is that using text over and over again is a very, very kind of classical music composition technique. A lot of choral vocal music in classical music, if you're not familiar with it, uses the very same texts over and over. Change the music, keep the text. And one of the benefits of that as a choir teacher and as a voice instructor is that the words don't change. So you can clearly focus on technique of the voice and how those words feel to sing. And so I just love that he's kind of throwing his inspiration back to this kind of old, can I say ancient way of writing music and of using text in music. All right, so this is another funny thing I loved. At some point, the interviewer asked him, "Where's Bebo? Like, have you talked to Bebo lately?" And Brendon said something that I think is fascinating, because I think of Bebo as like his performer alter ego. And if you know exactly the history with Bebo, please comment in the comment section below, because I want to know what you think of Bebo. But he said that he had not even seen or talked to Bebo since he got home, and he said he could not be happier. And I think that was so crazy that he kind of broke up with Bebo, because as a performer myself, it can be hard to sometimes separate yourself from a well-loved altar or performance persona. And it's imperative to do, but it's freaking hard. So the fact that he was kind of honest about the fact that he was like, "No, we don't talk anymore. Oops." And he was super happy about it. I think it's just showing that Brendon is in touch with himself. He's stepped back, he's rediscovered music in a different way. And he's drawing inspiration from deeper than his persona. I think it's lovely. Okay, the other thing that I really want to talk about is that Brendon urie admitted that he was nervous on stage. Not just like, "Ooh, wee, people on stage." He said he had dry mouth. And this was about the Today Show performance. And I remember watching that performance and thinking, "Oh yeah, Brendon's out, he's gonna be great, he's gonna be wonderful." And he was, of course. But he just had a look about him that I personally connected with, because he looked like he was kind of in fight or flight mode. You could tell he pushed through it, but there were some moments when I was like, "Is he gonna make it?" And he made it. Definitely he made it. Of course he did. But he mentioned in the interview, in the Sirius XM interview, that he had dry mouth. He was just kind of freaking out. He was like, it was just, for the first time in forever, I had butterflies again. And that was his first time, in his defense, that was his first time performing for a live audience of that stature, of that, population, for lack of a better word, in 3 years. So anybody can lose their nerve. All I'm saying is that we don't know how performers who look so comfortable on stage actually feel, and what it takes for them to get to that point that we see them being the awesome, jumpy, excited performer. But I just love that he admitted that he was nervous. Because some people are like, "Yeah, you just gotta fake it till you make it." Not always. Sometimes you can just be like, "Haha, this is what I'm feeling right now. It'll pass," but here I am. So I love that. It made me feel so seen as a person with performance anxiety and an anxiety situation regardless. Loved it. The last thing I really want to point out is something that happened at timestamp 32 minutes and 42 seconds. The interviewer was asking him something about, I think it was the Gloria Euphoria in Sad Clown. And these words fall on very high pitches. So Brendon sings the words with the high pitches and he sticks his tongue out like just, you know? And I would just like to take some time to mention that this sticking of the tongue out is just proof that he knows a thing or two about how to warm up the voice and how to make the voice work. This is a technique that I use a lot and that people use a lot in the voice studio to relieve tongue tension, particularly when singing high notes, but also anywhere in the voice. If you ever take voice lessons and you want to work through some tongue tension, try singing a scale or a warm-up with your tongue outside of your mouth. Does it look crazy? Absolutely, but it's wonderful. If the tongue is tense, it will seize up and like not allow you to sing with freedom and agility. If the tongue is loose and limber, you'll be able to sing with the tongue out of your mouth, but not doing much. It'll just be kind of sitting there hanging out. So for instance, this is a good example. Okay, so I got a little tense, the tongue started moving. So let me try to demonstrate what it'll look like without tongue tension. Taking the tongue outside of your mouth is just a great way to help singers realize that we can sing with no help from the tongue. The tongue is not meant to help us muscle through pitches, which we sometimes use it for. So I just had to call out that excellent technical thing that he did with ease, by the way. The last thing that I want to mention that he said is that he really wants this album to open people's eyes to a new musical sound that they may not be familiar with, but is reminiscent of his musical influences growing up, which I just love. This is so personal and honest to me. And I love this Brendon. Do I love all the other eras of Panic at the Disco? Absolutely, absolutely. But I really respect this one as a music teacher and as a singer and as a performer. And I think it's beautiful, him being inspired by a gifted guitar to write more guitar-centric pieces. He got inspired to do a kind of classically themed video because he started off writing the song on a harpsichord. I just absolutely love being inspired by the immediate things around you. And to me, that's the joy of being a musician and as a creative person, is that you can find inspiration anywhere, but particularly you thrive when you are fully in touch with how your surroundings are impacting you. I love it. So my final takeaways from this is that artists do best and do amazing work when you're working in pursuit of happiness, as he put it, and preferably with other like-minded artists. Also, he mentioned a lot of times not overworking himself, and he wanted to keep the music-making process joyful. And I think that that's wholly important for us who tend to be workaholics. So not overworking yourself while still reinventing your sound and refining your approach to music. Yeah, the other thing that I love about this interview, as a side note, is that he and the interviewer mentioned that they both watched Hot Ones, and they particularly shouted out the episode with Paul Rudd. And Paul Rudd to me is just a gem in and of himself, but also I love that they watched that show because that show single-handedly kept my mind occupied during the beginning of the pandemic. So I love that they know about that. All right, I think Brendon is amazing and I can't wait to see them. I'm gonna see them next weekend. I'm so stoked. I will be reviewing his VMA performance and I'll share that reaction soon, so be on the lookout for that video. The last thing is, let me know what you think about his new musical approach, about this Sirius XM interview, about his Today Show. Just let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm taking away what you've taken away from his recent performances. I'm super excited about this era of Panic at the Disco, and I feel so validated that it seems to be that he seems to be taking music in this musical theater direction. Subscribe if you want to for more content like this. I'll be talking a bunch about Panic at the Disco, particularly for the next couple of weeks. And give yourself a little grace, and I'll see y'all next time.